Hi, everyone. Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. On today's episode, I'm talking with a man who realized with his whole heart what his purpose is on this planet. Kyle McDowell thought his dreams were dashed in 2019, only to realize that his dream was only beginning. We talk about why the world does not care, how he led with an iron fist until he realized that wasn't working, how ambiguity is the enemy of progress, and mostly the beauty of the word we. You will love this conversation. I know you will.
It was intentional. I wanted to be portrayed in my professional life as someone who had all the answers, someone who was unflappable. My confidence is unshakable. And of course, none of those things are true. No one's confidence is ultimately and forever unshakable. All of us have self-doubts. So for me, it wasn't linear, but liberation, it is a choice. And for me, it was stacking small wins upon one another. And the first win for me was choosing to no longer be sad and angry. It was a very intentional shift at the end. The feeling and the fulfillment that comes from establishing and putting people in places to be their best I think it's priceless.
This episode is sponsored by The Dream Exit. The Dream Exit is a private, bespoke program for successful entrepreneurs with annual revenue between $5 million and $100 million who realize that they have one chance to get their dream exit right, and that the odds of realizing that dream by themselves, all alone, or at the last minute are stacked against them. In less than 90 days, we teach you how to design, build, and execute a customized dream exit playbook that gets your business ready for sale at its maximum value and gets you ready to maximize your meaning and purpose in your post-exit life, even if today you are not ready to sell. You see, dream exits just don't happen. They are the result of early, professional, and proven planning. So if you're an entrepreneur with annual sales between 5 and 100 million, and you want to learn how to 10x to 100x your chances of achieving the dream exit you deserve, go to dreamexitplaybook.com today. And now, here's Kyle. Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did Happen podcast. And hello, Kyle. How are you today?
Mike, man, it's great to be here. I'm wonderful. How about yourself?
I am great, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time. In fact, we got so engrossed in our conversation before we hit record, we got like half a podcast done already between us. So it's been a lot of fun. So many people come to the podcast and they're not, automatically ready to like engage like you are. And it just makes me feel good and makes my job really easy here. So thank you for doing that.
Of course. Well, it's mutual, it takes two to have a conversation, especially a good one. So I appreciate your approach, and I'm with you, man. We talked some good shop before we hit record. So hopefully it parlays itself into this conversation as well.
Yeah. And who knows, some of it might make its way into this for everybody. So I told you guys a little bit about Kyle in the intro, and now I'm going to tell you a little bit more. So Kyle McDowell is a former corporate executive of 3 Fortune 10 firms, turned best-selling author, speaker, and leadership expert. For nearly 3 decades, he doesn't look like he's got 3 decades under his belt, but for nearly 3 decades, McDowell amassed an impressive record of delivering great business results while leading tens of thousands of employees at some of America's largest corporations, including United Health Group, CVS Health, Maximus, and Bank of America. From a tiny cubicle to leading tens of thousands of employees at some of those big companies, to embarking on his life's mission, cultivating and inspiring a world of we-oriented leaders. In his book, which is called Begin With We, which is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, Kyle shares 10 guiding principles needed to build and sustain a culture of excellence. The 10 We's establish a common framework and cultural currency that has the same value, whether used by the new intern or by the most seasoned executive. In other words, it's for everybody. Shifting the focus from I, me, my to we, Kyle calls upon lessons learned during his leadership journey from that tiny cubicle to those Fortune 10 firms. His approach has converted countless bosses into leaders, thankfully, who inspire with passion and purpose. All of Kyle's socials, as far as I know and could find, are Kyle McDowell, McDowellinc. So website and everywhere else, I think. Is that right, Kyle?
That's right. Kyle McDowell Inc. is my website, and all social platforms are the same at Kyle McDowell Inc.
So well done and very smart there, making sure that you developed a handle that could be used everywhere. I've had people on the show before who give that advice, but when you're trying to do it with your own name, sometimes just your own name, it can be kind of difficult. So you found a way to do it, and that's, just for everyone listening, incredibly smart.
Lucky, more like it, lucky.
Okay, lucky smart. All right,
for me anyway. I'll take it. Hey, there's no shame in that, right? Luck is. I'd rather be lucky than good most days. I'm fine with that.
Well, it's kind of necessary sometimes. I mean,
Amen.
You can't just be good enough all the time. You need help from other people or other things, or
so true.
Kyle McDowell Inc. being available. You need these kinds of things. So, Kyle, I start every show the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Man, what a long answer that could be, but I'll, in the interest of time and for your audience's valuable time, it happened for me at my lowest. I left corporate America permanently in 2019 under circumstances that were different than I ever expected. I had just reached an impasse with the organization I was with. At the time, I was leading 15,000 employees. I had a $2 billion operating expense budget. I was responsible for profit and loss statements in the multi-billion-dollar range. Mm-hmm. And I'm keeping the company kind of agnostic at this point because there's no benefit in sharing. But suffice to say, my experience at that organization, Mike, was the antithesis of what I had seen in the role just prior to. There was toxicity, duplicity, there was angling, there was, all the things that you would associate negatively with corporate America. And I'll never forget this. The day that I left, I was sitting in a chair in my living room. My wife came home and could tell something was wrong. She's like, "What's up?" And I said, "I left." She said, "What?" I said, "I left." And I said, "But I'm going to make this the best thing that ever happened to me." Mm-hmm. And she, like a good wife will do, she was so supportive. We went out and got some drinks that night. And that was the moment for me where I realized, and I mean this, and I mean this in a very delicate way, but I think you'll get the intention here. The world does not care that I was no longer in corporate America. Nobody was coming to save me. But I knew that the role that I had played in the organization I was with prior to this final stop for me was the most impactful, fulfilling, passionate period of my professional career. And it's also where I developed these principles, the 10 W's that are the foundation for my book. And if I juxtapose those two experiences, I left an organization on such a high note, knowing that I'd made such a difference, created an environment that was longing for excellence. And I left there with my head held high, went to this other organization. It didn't work out the way I'd hoped. And I knew I had a purpose that I needed to take action on, exposing once and for all the ails inside of the corporate world that I had experienced. In some cases, admittedly, I had even created. I led with an iron fist for many years of my 28 years in corporate America. And for me, that was where that separation was, where I knew I had a bigger calling, something I needed to do, and that was to get these principles out into the world, because the changes that they made for me, both professionally and personally, were so profound. I felt an obligation, and still feel an obligation, to share them as widely, as loudly as I possibly can. And that brings us together today. It's still part of my mission.
In this impasse, I think the word leaves a lot of people with certain thoughts about what that might mean, but I would really like to hear what the impasse actually was. Was it a sit down? Was it can you describe it?
Yeah, yeah. So I joined the organization reporting to the president of the division for which I was brought on. And there was under no uncertain, no ambiguity, right? My job was to drive massive cultural change. So that was a theme throughout all of my career. Going to an organization as small as a handful of people in a team, all the way up to 10, 15,000, and inject some enthusiasm and try to inspire folks to remember that they're part of something bigger, that we all have an aligned mission of sorts. So I took the role, and by the way, let's not be naive. When anytime someone is given that charter, some will not agree with the approach. I remember one time that president once told me, if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs,
Yeah.
which can be a little crass, but I had such a successful run in these turnaround and cultural transformation areas that I knew and still know what it takes to transform an organization from toxic to really high functioning and excellent. And the impasse came when it was time to make some tough decisions. And there were probably, I would say there's two sides to this coin. So I want to be completely fair about this. There was an impasse on some of the decisions that I needed to make. And I had a hard time gathering consensus with those that sat in the ivory tower of this multi-billion-dollar company. That was part of it.
Consensus meaning that they would agree with you that you could make these changes, or does that mean what you mean? Was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the best analogy or kind of comparison I can give you is the NFL. So in the NFL, a lot of teams have a general manager and a head coach. The general manager puts the people on the roster. The head coach manages the roster, puts the best players on the field, and so on. I took the role with the understanding I was playing general manager and coach. Okay. But when it came time to make personnel changes, there was some pushback. And there's a whole probably other podcast that we could record on the why that was a challenging moment for me. At the end of the day, I'll boil it down to this. I'm going to be me. And if I was hired to do a job and I know the path to get to that ultimate destination, I know where it is, I know how to lead the team to get there. And if my hands are tied not getting there, I'm not going to sit there and draw a paycheck and just be average. I can't do it. I had too much time invested in my career, and I need more. It's soul sucking to me to show up every day, keep your head down, be opinionless, and just kind of be a yes man. I couldn't do it. Now, the other side of that coin that turned out to be, I think, a little more prominent in my exit than I understood at first was the gentleman that hired me, the president of that division that I mentioned earlier. He left the organization. Company brought in somebody new, and sometimes that works out in ways that are not as welcoming for the incumbent. And so what happened was, the day that I announced my departure, the company announced my replacement. And my replacement was a 19-year colleague of the new boss that had just joined the organization a few months earlier. So it was, in some ways you could argue that it was a bit calculated, that the writing was on the wall. New president brings in his own crew. I get it. That's fine. So I think it was just those two things. I felt a little hamstrung on what I needed to get done, but also I think there were other agendas at play. Now, I not for 1 second do I want any of your audience to hear that and either find sympathy for me or cheer on the move that was made for me to leave, because challenge is a requirement for progress. If I never went through that experience, if I never had that it's time to go experience, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. I never would have written my book. I never would be on stage today evangelizing these principles that I know can change lives.
Yeah.
Mike, I was at Aldi a few months ago. It's been several months now, actually, giving a talk. And
the supermarket chain?
No, Audi, the
Audi, the car. AUDI.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. At the end of my talk, I was delivering a keynote. At the end of my talk, this fella raised his hand, big, muscular, burly dude, shaved head, really intimidating figure. He leans forward in his chair and to a group of executives, he says, if you will allow it, this book can change your life. It changed my life.
Mm.
And more importantly, it changed how I'm raising my children.
Really?
Dude, I have chills saying that.
Yeah.
Absolutely happened that way. And the reason I share that story is I never would have been given that opportunity to have that much of an impact on a stranger had I not gone through some unfortunate things in my journey. So I just think progress is always the result of overcoming one or more challenges. And that was a challenge that I took head on, and I think it's working out.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, it's interesting. I didn't ask the impasse question because I wanted people to feel sorry for you. I asked it because I think there are a lot of people who are at an impasse or a similar type impasse to what you were at, and they feel stuck in that impasse. They feel powerless in that impasse. There aren't a lot of people, I think, who would, walk away from that impasse. They would instead fight through that impasse or feel unempowered to do anything except.
Right.
So I'm glad that I asked, and because I think you did share something with people that can give them confidence, not to leave like you did or whatever, but the confidence that if this were to be something that led to you leaving, it's a start. It's not an end. And if you feel like you're stuck in this impasse because you don't have anything to fall back on, you're probably wrong. You just need to think about it outside of your current, paradigm.
So true. So true. And by the way, you're touching on something that I've wrestled with and I talk about quite a bit is, and by the way, you could not be more accurate in that. I think corporate America is littered with people who feel stuck. They feel as if this machine is controlling essentially most of their day, part of their night, and maybe occasionally on weekends. Mike, we work on average 90 to 100,000 hours in our lifetime. The only thing we will do more during our lifetime, during our time on this planet, is sleep. So the part I wrestle with, though, is I was very fortunate in that when I exited, and I had a contract and I had a non-compete. So I was able to make sure that my commitments, my bills specifically, were going to be taken care of for an extended period of time. I was very fortunate. Now, I worked very hard to put myself in that position, and I'm not naive. And this is the part I wrestle with. Not everybody is as fortunate as that.
That's right.
Yeah. So for you and I to sit here, or for me to say, take that leap of faith, go do something that you're passionate about. Don't just clock in, clock out. I will never say those things because I recognize all of our commitments are different. We all have obligations to which we must attend. And for me to naively say, just leave your company and write a book, and that's not reality. But what the other side of that coin that I, when I'm wrestling with this, that I share is, you do have a voice in your own future, even inside of an organization that you feel may not bring the best out of you. We have a choice every single day, and that choice is: do I want to have an impact on those around me? Be damned the higher ups or the toxicity that I see around me. I still have a choice to be better, and I have a choice to have an impact on those around me and make them better. Mm-hmm. So it's not you do have a say in this. It's just not lather, rinse, repeat. It can be, and I don't fault those that follow the lather, rinse, repeat process because there's safety in that, and I understand that. But you said it. We absolutely. It doesn't have to be that way.
So let's talk about this leading with an iron fist that you said. So you led with an iron fist for a good part of your career, I believe you admitted. And maybe it was necessary. Maybe that was just who you are. I mean, there are lots of people out there that's you've been sort of taught. It's the way you do it, right? Stick, not carrot. It's like stick, not carrot. How did you develop that? And when was it that you said, hey, this may not be the best way or the right way for me?
I didn't know any other way the first, I would say, 20 years. I didn't know any other way. And in hindsight, it's clear to me it was ego. It was absolutely ego, and a lack of self-confidence that compelled me to behave in ways that I didn't. I always equated my title with authority, which is a really silly way to look at leadership. I was a boss.
That's a bossy
I was
way.
never a leader.
Yeah,
I was a boss. And here's the tragedy in the whole thing, because I know your audience, I'm certain there are members of your audience who can relate, in that we've all had that boss. We've all had someone who is looking to play gotcha rather than inspire and motivate and actually help me be better. Now, I felt as if when I was in those years, I always delivered great results, and I always felt as if my teams had a tremendous amount of respect for me. I later learned they feared me.
How did
which
you learn
is, I opened my eyes, and I started to be a little more self-reflective and introspective than I had ever been before. And part of that is circumstance. So I enrolled. I went back to business school at the age of 34, and I was exposed, and that's when I kind of became a student of leadership. I became exposed to other approaches, and was like, wow, you really can do big things without berating people, without banging on the desk, without demanding people work 70 hours a week. You actually can deliver great results not doing it that way. And I think, by the way, there's this thing that happens inside corporate America that I'm working so hard to squash, and that is there's this cycle of bad leadership or bad bosses that goes on and on and on until somebody steps in. And the cycle is pretty simple. Most people, when they raise their hand inside of an organization to say, I want to take on another role, I want to be promoted to a person that is a boss or a manager or a person with authority, however we want to define it. And naturally, they feel as if they have to endear themselves to the people that are making those hiring decisions. Usually, by the way, the same people they loathed interacting with on a daily basis before, because they were treated poorly. So human nature kicks in, and for me to be considered in this position of promotion, I need to endear myself to these people to whom I've reported probably in some way or another, and their approach has not been warm and it's not been inspiring. But I know if I want to get this job, I need to kind of mimic that behavior, and so it goes on and on and on. And especially when you get put into that new position of leadership, you're reporting to someone that you see how they're behaving, and by the way, they're behaving the way that they've seen others behave. So until someone steps in the middle of that and says, enough, I'm going to lead in a way that I've never been led and be the leader I've never had, that this will continue in perpetuity. Now, you asked, when did it change for me? And it changed for me. I remember the night it changed for me. You and I were chatting about Pressfield and the War of Art earlier. And I had one of those moments. It wasn't as sexy as maybe he describes it with the muse on the shoulder and those things, but I had just taken a role in an organization leading about 14,000 people. It was a multi-billion-dollar portfolio that was really purpose-driven work. It was to lead the Affordable Care Act enrollment centers as well as 1-800-MEDICARE. I was hired by a government contractor to lead these organizations. Right. I had been told in no uncertain terms that the team I was inheriting had some silos. There was a bit of dysfunction here and there. I wouldn't go as far to say it was toxic, but there were certainly opportunities for us to behave a little differently and live a different paradigm. The night before, this is when it all went down. The night before I was to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of my newly inherited organization. I'd been on the ground maybe 60 days at the time. I was in my hotel room in Lawrence, Kansas. I still had the suit on that I'd worn that day to the office. And I knew I had to come with something compelling. And it was a real gut check moment for me. It's like, be careful what you wish for. You wanted to lead a big organization and drive change. Now's your chance. What are you going to do? So with my laptop in my lap, had a blank PowerPoint template open, and I just started typing. And within a couple of hours, tops, I had 10 sentences that were in front of me. Each of them then and now still begin with the word we. I'm not super creative. So now I have the 10 We's. And I went the we route unintentionally, again, with no muse, because it occurred to me that the handful of direct reports that I was taking on, in addition to the folks underneath them, they had seen it all. They had the fellow before me who he was let go under really, really unfortunate circumstances. I believe the woman before him was also dismissed. I'm not certain. So they had heard, well, I'll say it this way, me walking in saying what I was going to do, what my past and how I was able to turn this thing around and be the savior that everybody was looking for. It would just have alienated them, and it would have put me on a pedestal that I did not want to be associated with. So I walked out the next morning and I said, you guys, these 10 principles, I don't even know if I called them principles at the time. These 10 We's will be the sentence. These will be the rules essentially that govern first how we treat each other, how I will hold you accountable to every one of these principles. And I'm going to be very militant about this because I expect you to do the same with me. I want you to hold me accountable. If you see me behaving in any way contrary to any one of these positions or any one of these principles, I want you to grab me by the ear, call me out. That was a really, the reactions in the room were bizarre. And number two, these will be the rules that dictate how we treat those we serve externally. And what followed, man, was the most profound series of years of my career. Our business results transformed and turned around dramatically. The leadership acumen and the caring of the folks on the team became so exponentially greater than anything I had ever witnessed before. So, side note, so much so when I ultimately left that organization, I called an all hands meeting, probably 1,000 people on the phone. I wept. I cried because leaving this team was like leaving my family. I've been gone from that organization for about 5 years now. I still have one-on-ones with a handful of folks from that team. Every 4 to 6 weeks, we just check in on each other to make sure we're all doing well. And I think that's a commentary of the impact that we had on each other. But it all began back at that hotel room in Lawrence, Kansas. That's when that turnaround started for me.
And thank you for sharing all that. And as you were talking through that, the part about, copying the behavior of other people because you think that's what has to be in order for you to get the job, the promotion, to be successful in the particular organization. I kept thinking of, okay, that's the difference between looking through a window and looking into a mirror, right? So you're looking in at a window to this person who is maybe a lead with iron fist kind of person, but they're the top person, right? So you're thinking, that's what I need to be in order to have a chance to be the top person, instead of looking in it and being like, is that really me? Do I want to pull that off? Can I pull that off? Should I pull that off?
Should I? Great question.
Yeah. Should I pull that off? So anyway, I thank you for putting that through me. Now back to this Lawrence, Kansas thing. Okay, so you deliver, and these people are probably sitting there. These 40 or 50 people are saying, "Oh, here's Kyle. He's the new whatever the guy's name was, whatever the woman's name was. He's the new one. I've been here longer than he's probably going to be here." So I'm just thinking of all this skepticism that could be going on. You lay out these 10 things. What happens after that? And how long does it take before they believe the 10 things or believe 5 of them or 7? Or even 1?
Well, I'll tell you a story. At the end of that presentation, I learned, I don't know if it was at dinner that night or the next night, it was a group of us that were out. And one of the gentlemen was vulnerable enough to share with me that during the talk, he Googled the 10 We's because he had thought I had stolen them from somewhere. I was plagiarizing them. But it gets worse. He also asked for the PowerPoint. He wanted my presentation. And I said, sure, Nick, you can have it. No problem. He said, I want to show it to my team. I said, of course. I want this to be cascaded all the way through the organization. Well, he later admitted, we became friends sometime later. He later admitted he wanted the PowerPoint because he needed to check the properties of the document to see if I was the one who indeed created the document or if I had stolen it, borrowed it from somewhere else.
Skepticism is on fire with this guy.
On fire. But as I wrapped, but going back to the speech part of it, when I shared those principles, as I looked across the room, I would guess half of the audience was optimistic and energized. I would guess a quarter was kind of on the fence, like wait and see, let's maybe trust but validate. And the last quarter was just absolutely obstinate. This guy's full of it. And well, yeah, I'll be here long after he will. Exactly what you said. And as a matter of fact, one of the loudest and most vocal detractors was a direct report of mine. She was a jerk. And I say that because, just bear with me, because at the end of this little story, you'll see why I say that. At every turn, Julia challenged me. It was, my favorite example is I asked for an Excel document because I wanted to do some analysis on some numbers. I was trying to get up to speed and learn the business. And she sent me a screenshot of an Excel document, which is useless, as you know. Yeah. So I said, come on, man, let me just send me the workbook, please. She sent me a tab. So then I said, all right, she's being difficult for the sake of being difficult. And we'd had a meeting, I think, with a handful of people on, and she was very vocal about disagreeing with something she was just snarky almost. I haven't worked there in 5 years, and she is still one of those people that I mentioned that I have one-on-ones with on every 4 to 6 week basis. She is one of my closest business colleagues, a great friend now. And and I think her behavior is natural in some ways, in that if you've been burned or if you've been exposed to bad bosses throughout your career and someone else comes in with a different talk track, the skepticism is natural. Now, you don't have to be a jerk to the new person. You could be a little more welcoming. But she knows I tell the story. I tell it all the time because I think it's a beautiful commentary of how, if we're open-minded and we have and recognize that there's something to be learned from every single person and every scenario of our lives, we will do that. We will learn. But if you shut down and are not open and vulnerable to a different way of thinking, you won't see that change. And I'll also add, man, she is now one of the better people leaders I have ever been associated with. And I will say confidently, she was not when we first met. And I don't take credit for that. I think she deserves the credit. But the skepticism was so strong. One of my direct reports was the loudest with it, who is now one of the biggest kind of proponents. They had me back. She had me back to her organization to give a speech late last year. So we've stayed in touch, and she's a great friend of mine.
I've seen in my experience a couple of times where you have this kind of person. You're a new person. You walk into an organization as the leader or the owner or whatever. And you have this person who right off the bat, you're like, what is wrong with this person? Why are they such a jerk? Why? And it feels to me like almost every time it's a cry of sorts for help, meaning the skepticism was something implanted in them through experience with other people that didn't work out well for them. And they're usually the smartest people who are like this, right? The most informed, most talented, smartest people, committed people, actually. But they develop this fear that something about how they define themselves is going to be taken away by someone like you, like the new leader, because that's what's always happens to them. And I feel like the smart thing for leaders to do is, when you see that kind of behavior, do your best to embrace that person, because that person is, like you just mentioned, is probably going to be your biggest supporter if you embrace them. If you instead let it go and then think, this person's just a jerk, this person and they continue to be that way, you lose. You lose. And I know that's not universal. Some people are just jerks, but that type of behavior, when I've seen it, that's what because I've made the mistake of not embracing it, like being like, I don't want anything to do with you. Right? To instead saying, what do I have to lose if I embrace it? And what do I have to gain? I mean, like I said, these people are usually really smart, really good. And they've just been behaved into they
Man,
whatever the right word is, but yeah.
man, such an astute observation. And you just described this person, Julia, to a T. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Um, so I would add one other thought, man,
Yeah.
because it sounds like you've been in this situation as well, right? When someone is just a jerk,
Yeah.
and you said it, it's true. Some people are just jerks. I think that's the exception. I think you'd agree with me that, for the most part, I believe people come to work. Let's just move past the fact that most of us have to. So okay, that's a given. But I do believe most people come to work because they want to have an impact. They want to be fulfilled. They want to have an experience that is worthwhile. And instead of turning a cheek and walking away from someone who behaves that way and just chalking it up to that person being a jerk, it actually is harder for us to use your word, because I love it, embrace who they are, to get underneath why that's happening, why they're behaving the way that they are. For me, in this specific scenario, it was a real test of who I wanted to be portrayed as, and who I was selling to them. Here's what I mean by that. So these principles, right? The 10 We's. Principle number 8 is we challenge each other. It's my favorite of all, because it drives real progress in an organization when the boss is vulnerable enough to receive challenges from the team, when the team is obligated to challenge the leader when they see something. The team is obligated to challenge one another. Challenges go in every direction in the organizations I like to lead. But that principle, we challenge each other, is meaningless without the following principle, which is we embrace challenge. Now, remember, I stood in front of this group and said, if you see me behaving any way contrary to any one of these principles, grab me by the ear. Lucky for me, and I do think it was luck, because I don't think I had the wherewithal. She just got under my skin so quickly that I don't think I had the wherewithal to do this intentionally. I think it was luck, in that I recognized the challenges she was presenting had to be embraced, because I just stood on stage talking about we challenge each other and we embrace challenge. And if I didn't, and they saw me bang my fist on a desk, and they saw me say, like, send me the damn spreadsheet, instead of, hey man, come on, just send me that workbook, please. Right. I'm now a hypocrite, and the whole thing's a house of cards.
Yeah, one and done.
One and done. So yeah. I feel in hindsight, the way, and I think there's a lesson in here for so many of us, and it was for me, is to go deeper, man. Go deeper into the challenge that's being, and that the person and their demeanor and their attitude is presenting to you. Go deeper. Why are they behaving that way? Work with that person to understand, not just what they're saying, but why they're saying what they're saying. And if you can get through that, the other side of that is a relationship that is really hard to fracture. I mean, she and I are tight now, but it never would have happened if I had played the role that I played the previous 20-ish years.
I think that's amazing that you still, every 4 to 6 weeks, touch base with a handful at least of people, because I think that's kind of rare too.
Yeah. Well, here's how I would jump on what you said is, of my 28-year career, any one-on-ones or regular or recurring conversations that I have with former colleagues, they're all from that organization, maybe one or two from the previous 20 years.
Interesting. Okay.
So there's a connection in that, the way I behaved in the long-term relationships that lasted the first 20-ish years, there's one or two folks, versus the way I behaved and led the last 6 or 8 years of my career, and the relationships that have persisted since then. It's tenfold. So there's something to be said for those relationships and the impact you can have on them, but they have on you as well. And I think that's where a lot of us just we punch in, we punch out, we check boxes, we catch people doing the wrong thing, we provide discipline or coaching, we do an annual review. But the moment you realize when you invest care into those that you lead, the outcome is more than just business results. The outcome is, it can be, if you're open to it, lifelong connections. And that is very powerful in my book.
Yeah. Yeah. Belief in someone is nurtured belief in someone is something that's,
Priceless.
yeah, it never loses value.
There's no better feeling.
Never loses
in my mind. There's literally no better feeling in the work, not just the workplace, but in life. We all love to be loved. We all like to be acknowledged. And when you are in a position, I just feel this way, man, at this point of my life. If I can improve someone else's standing, their position, even give them a better day, just acknowledging that they're having a bad, that's my obligation at this point. And I think it's an obligation of all humans, but we've lost that throughout the course of time. And I'm trying to bring it back, especially I'm starting in the workplace.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad you're there. I'm glad you are there doing this. So 2019, you have this separation. You and your wife go out for drinks, kind of, just settle in with what happened. And what happens the next day? What do you do? We're talking in March of 2024. So 5 years later, give or take, you're a whole new person. You got a whole new thing, a whole new purpose. But what was that the day after the day?
Man, so remember, I mentioned that the fellow that hired me also left.
Yeah.
I reached out to him first because I said, I just wanted to, it was almost like therapy. I was like, I didn't see this coming. Obviously, you're not here, so you didn't see it coming. But he said, Kyle, you're going to go through 3 phases. I'll never forget this. He said, you're going to go through 3 phases. The first is sadness. And I was very sad. I felt like my identity had been stripped from me. The second is anger. He said, when you move beyond sadness, you're going to be like, you're going to feel as if you were wronged, and you're going to go through all these scenarios of how, life's not fair and woe is me. And the third phase will be liberation. And he was right. I went through all 3 of those phases, and the sadness part lasted in hindsight, it wasn't terribly long. Just a long, maybe a week or so, maybe 2. Anger lasted a lot longer. And I was conscious to manifest that anger into activity and outcomes. And by that, I mean, I'm going to make good. Something good will come of this. And because I'm going to make something good come of this. I felt so strongly that I have something for the world that needed to be heard. And that's these principles. And so before I reached liberation, I had this crossroad. I approached a crossroads like, okay, do I want to go back into the corporate world, try to get this fancy title back and lead, tens of thousands of people again, or do I have a bigger calling?
Mm-hmm.
And I landed on the latter. I didn't know exactly how I was going to approach that calling. I didn't know. I never thought about writing a book. I went through a period of what I now call detox, where, this thing was forever clenched in my hand nonstop. And I was always checking for emails that weren't there because I didn't have a job. And I'll never forget, man, one evening, I was getting really close to, in my brain anyway, I hadn't talked to anybody else about it, kicking around the idea of writing a book. By the way, I should mention, many people from the organization that Julia was at reached out to say, it's time to write a book. I had cheerleaders from 2 jobs ago saying, come on, man, are you who you say you are? Never mind what just happened. Get back on the horse and spread the word. And that compelled me and encouraged me, inspired me to do it. But the never forget part was this. I'm the kind of person, Mike, when I say something out loud, you can take it to the bank. It's going to happen. And I was ruminating about this book idea, and I finally approached my wife. I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And from that moment on, I was committed. I started the writing process, connected with the publisher, and I've spent literally every single day, maybe with the exception of a week that I took off for our wedding, just maniacally focused on spreading this word, and it's working. When I decided to write the book, I told my wife that if this book sold 1,000 copies, I'd be over the moon. We just passed 10,000 copies sold.
That's
I've
awesome.
never been busier with speaking and coaching clients. So I feel as if all of everything we've talked about for the last several minutes was part of my journey, and it was supposed to happen this way.
So let me ask you about the three phases, because
Yeah,
those I don't know that I've heard the first two, and I've heard different words for the third, for
sure.
liberation. And I just want to dig in a little bit because, and I've been through this myself. So I experienced these three things myself when I was 26.
Do you recall how long you were in each of those phases?
Well, that's what I want to ask you about. So sadness, I was in for no doubt. I was in that for a month, maybe longer. And that was just complete, like, you feel shame, or I did. I feel shame. I feel like, why me? It's very just like, I'm going to give up for a little while. And I'm just going to blame. It's really a blame game. I'm going to blame. So that's the sadness part for me. The anger, this is unfair. They made a mistake. I'm going to get back at them, or whatever. So I was in that for a few months.
Longer than sadness.
Longer than sadness, yes.
Same.
But the liberation part, that's what's really interesting to me, because those first two are very present things. Like, when you are sad, today, right at this moment, I am sad. Same with anger. But liberated, you really don't know that you're liberated. Even if you're on the path to liberation, or you're following this new purpose you have or whatever, until it's validated. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just I want to hear what your perspective is on that, because sometimes, like for me, I ended up starting a company, and I thought it was great and all, but I don't know when it took a long time before I felt like, you know what? Like people always say, that's the best thing that ever happened to me, that I'm liberated now.
Yeah.
That took a while, because there's a lot of work and validation that has to occur in order for that. It's not a like, today I feel liberated because whatever. It's like, oh, I've been doing this for 2 years, and man, do I feel liberated. How do you process that?
Yeah, I just love this part of our conversation, man. I have to say, I do literally probably a handful of podcasts a week, and rarely am I given an opportunity to really go deep in the psychology of who I am, who we are, how we became what we are, the journey we're on, where we might ultimately land. I really embrace this opportunity. So thank you. For me, it was not, I would say the shift from sadness to anger was almost a light switch. The switch from anger to liberation was not linear. I'm replaying kind of things that went through my mind and I was experiencing back in those days. And there were certainly days, and I would even go as far to say the whole process wasn't linear either. So while I would flirt with liberation from anger, of course, sadness would raise its ugly head every now and then.
Because
so
it's
there was
easier.
a spring.
Because it's easier. It's easier to invite the sadness back in than it is
easier.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so true, man. So, I'd be lying if I said there was a sentinel moment that liberation came. Even deciding to write the book, I had no idea I'd be doing podcasts and speaking on this all around the country. A few years later. But for me, it was important I'd always been portrayed, and it was intentional. I wanted to be portrayed in my professional life as someone who had all the answers, someone who was unflappable. My confidence is unshakable. And of course, none of those things are true. No one's confidence is ultimately and forever unshakable. All of us have self-doubts. I suffer from imposter syndrome to this day. And by most accounts, with maybe a touch of arrogance, most corporate-minded, career-minded people would have traded places with me in a minute. But yet here I am, questioning my value. Am I good enough to be doing this? So for me, it wasn't linear, but liberation comes, it is a choice. And for me, it was stacking small wins upon one another. And the first win for me was choosing to no longer be sad and angry.
Mm.
And of course, that wasn't a light switch. I would backslide, but it was a very intentional shift at the end. And now all three of those phases are essentially fuel for everything that I do, because I know there's a place in the world for this message. And I feel as if I'm doing a disservice, not only to myself, but for those I have a chance to impact if I don't follow it.
Mm. I'm so glad you brought that confidence thing up because so for me, confidence is something that's shown, not said. It's shown, not said, right? As soon as
Yes.
someone is telling me how confident they are, I can be almost 100% sure that the reason they're telling me that is because they're looking for some type of validation.
Yeah.
That it's yeah. So big mistake, I think, for people, any leader. If you want to demonstrate how confident you are, show it. Don't
Show
tell
me,
it.
brother.
Don't tell
Show
it.
me.
Don't tell it to me. As soon as you tell it to me, I'm like, oh, I'm worried about you. I don't know.
Yeah. Gosh, there's a quote that I'll probably butcher, and maybe you'll edit this out. I don't know, but it goes something like, confidence comes from a stack of undeniable proof that you can do what you say you do.
Right.
Again, I probably butchered that. There's a much more eloquent way to say that, but I think it's true. Real confidence comes from not being excellent at the thing that you're aspiring to be excellent at, but progress towards that thing. Right? It's like everything else, man. If I want to learn a second language, like, I'm going to be terrible at it for a while. I have to embrace that terribleness,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word, to get better. If I want to lose weight and go to the gym today, nothing's going to change. Go tomorrow, nothing's going to change. But I know that I'm putting in the work, and the confidence comes from knowing my consistency will outlast my insecurity
Yeah.
on that front. So it's just a matter of just stacking those reps one upon the other. And that's where, for me, that's where confidence comes. But even still, dude, I've sold 10,000 books. I've stood on stage in front of thousands of people. I led tens of thousands of people. I struggle with confidence and imposter syndrome more than I'm proud to admit. But I think owning it and speaking openly about it is my path to overcoming it.
And I think it also may very well speak to you knowing that every time you have an opportunity to talk to someone or be on some stage or be on TV with someone and be on a podcast, you're challenging yourself to be a little better than you were the last time. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be nervous about it. You wouldn't feel like it's imposter syndrome, right? Or when somebody who isn't just going to put your book up and say, here are the 10 W's. Kyle, can you walk us through the 10 W's? And you're like, okay, I'm going to walk you through the 10 W's. But instead says, tell me about, the Lawrence, Kansas thing. Okay, that's great. Now tell me about how you actually turn those people around, because it's fantastic that you. So, speaking of the 10 Weeks and the book, Begin with We, when you told your wife you wanted to write a book, you put it out there. When you say something, it's like putting it in the bank. Mm-hmm. Did you know it was going to be Begin with We? Did you know it was going to be the 10 Weeks? Had you forgotten about the 10 Weeks? And I don't mean forgotten like forever, but just sort of put them aside.
What a great question. No, I didn't. Yes, I knew the book would be, the foundation of the book would be the 10 We's. I did not know it would be that name. Here's a really cool story. I thought the book was going to be called The 10 We's. And I wrestled with a number of different titles. And when Begin with We surfaced, guess who I called? Julia.
You called Julia, yeah.
Called Julia. And I said, hey, man, I'm kicking this around. I have chills telling the story. I said, I'm kicking this around. What do you think about Begin with We? And she goes, that's it. That's it. I go, well, what do you mean? She goes, that's what you did with us. When you joined our team, that's what you did with us. You began with we. You didn't tell us who you were, what you were going to do, how important you were. You began with us. Done. That's the name of the book. And I love the question. Did I put the 10 we's in a corner somewhere? Not. I did the opposite, and here's why. I found myself becoming such a staunch proponent of these principles in the workplace that I started to notice that I was not living those same principles in my personal life. You know, here's a guy that's the number one principle of the 10 we's is we do the right thing, always.
Yeah.
And I had this, you talk about when did it happen or how did it happen? I was in a grocery store parking lot unloading my groceries into my truck. And I, like so many of us do, I took my cart and put it right next in the parking spot next to me where my truck was. And I had this epiphany that was, hang on, dude, if you're the guy that says we do the right thing always, is it the right thing to leave this grocery cart in the middle of the parking lot when you know it just needs to be taken 30 yards that direction?
Right.
And from that moment forward, I tried to be, I'm not perfect at this. I tried to behave in a way as if there's like a documentary film crew following me to test me if I'm living what I'm saying, if I'm walking the walk. So I never put them aside. As a matter of fact, they are now more front and center and present in my life than ever before, because I just believe now that establishing your personal principles. In the workplace, for me, it was, what do I want my leadership legacy to be? How do I want, when my team goes home and they're at the dinner table talking to their significant others and the kids are at the table, what are they saying about the boss? Are they saying he's somebody who is empathetic and understands the challenges that they're facing every single day? Is it someone that is encouraging them to be excellent and be their best? Or is it someone that just belittles them and talks down to them and is looking for them to make a mistake? And then on the personal side, do I want to be the friend that leads by example? It's we number 2. Do I want to be the friend that picks someone else up, picks my wife up when she's struggling, or propels someone to new heights? That's we number 6. We pick each other up. And I just found that consistency was so important. And man, if you want to insult me, the worst word you can ever use to insult me is hypocrite. I just can't tolerate being known for something on one side of the coin and behaving in another way. That's hypocrisy. And I can't be seen in that light. So it was always, it's never been more front and center. And I'm glad you asked about the title, because that's one of my favorite Julia stories also.
I'm smiling as you're telling this story, Kyle, the documentary film crew sort of mentality to, you know, what you're doing in your life. Like, I'm saying these 10 things. What am I doing in my own life? And if someone were to see me on film right now or put it up on a billboard, would they be like,
that's right,
that guy's a hypocrite, right?
That's right.
That's a great way to, you know, to put guardrails on yourself, right? Because a lot of times people, it's easy to say things. It's easy to write a book about things. It's easy to get up on a stage and say things to people. It's a little bit harder to do all of those things consistently and purposefully and maybe even habitually. It's a bit harder. Takes it, and there are a lot of people who think it's okay, I think, to do 8 out of 10 maybe, or 7. Well, 2 other things, the we thing. So at some point in my career, when we started doing all of our goal setting and stuff, I replaced the goal, or I didn't replace the goal, but I started every goal with we will. Instead of like revenue of X, you know, we will generate revenue of X. We will be, you know, because I felt like that was a way to make the goals not only feel personalized, but they're ours then. They're not the companies, you know, they're not the organizations. They're not Kyle's goals, because I don't care about Kyle's goals, you know, and you can't just do that either, because people will be like, well, I never agreed to that, you know. So you have to be, it requires a collaborative process that we're all going to put a stamp on, a stamp of we on it. And then the third thing you said, and I remember this going back many, many years. I said to my wife, I do not want to be the person that someone has worked with me all of their life and they're retired and they're sitting around the kitchen table with their wife and they're bitching about me. I don't want to be that person. And to the extent that I can control or have some influence on it, either by being exactly who I say I'm going to be, and by being a good leader to the best of my ability, but also to make sure that when I have people in my life that I think are going to be like that, no matter what I do, I probably have to move on from those people, because
Yes.
they'll find someone else to be that person that they'll
Yes.
be talking about. I don't want it to be me. Just don't want that.
Brilliant, Mike. So there's these two words that I think very few people use together, and that's leadership legacy. We all have one, and I don't mean those that lead teams. We all have a leadership legacy. Am I viewed as someone that lifted others up and helped others achieve their goals? Doesn't have anything to do with authority. Doesn't have anything to do with your title.
Right.
And I found that, and again, 2 decades after I started my journey, I found that. And by the way, for your audience, this does not mean that you have to lead in a way that allows others to run you over. It doesn't mean you're not in command of the situation. It doesn't mean you're not in command of your team. It's not those things. It is recognizing the importance the importance and the impact that you can have if you choose to take that route. And once more, making the decision to have that impact on someone is so fulfilling on really 3 fronts. When you care and take time to invest in the growth of others, they benefit. If you really care and are effective at it, the team benefits, because now you have a group of people who know their leader is invested in their journey and wants better for them. But most profoundly, but indirectly, you benefit, because the feeling and the fulfillment that comes from establishing and putting people in places to be their best I think it's priceless.
Mm.
So that leadership legacy, I think, is something that we should think about more often. And I'll add this last thing on the leadership legacy thing, and not being, I don't want people to think it just means being soft. I don't think anyone who's ever worked with me, reported to me, or had been associated with me in a business context will tell you that Kyle's a pushover. As a matter of fact, I go very far the other direction to say, you may not like what I have to say. You could disagree. And if you disagree, you are not allowed, you are obligated to tell me you disagree. And let's have a conversation about that.
Right.
But you will never know you'll never question where I stand on something. Which is something I found to be so pervasive in corporate America, and that is this duplicity that so many leaders, or rather bosses, will say one thing in a meeting, go to another meeting and say something completely different, and leaving the teams kind of like saying, who's on first. So I think ambiguity is the enemy of progress in that regard.
Ambiguity is the enemy of progress. That's a great sentence.
Yeah. I think so much of our work lives and disappointments in work come from a lack of aligning on where's the finish line.
Yeah.
Like aligning on expectations. Another quote that I'll botch, and I don't recall where I heard this, was, failure to establish expectations is a recipe for premeditated disappointment.
Right.
Have you heard that one?
I've heard it. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so true, right? And it's not just, I shared it with my wife. Actually, she shared it with me. In a different light, because I was being obstinate about something, and she's like, "Well, you didn't tell me that's what you expected. Like I didn't know that's what you wanted." Like, well, of course you didn't know, because I never told you. That's on me, and it was.
Yeah, I call that leading by osmosis. Like, you think, oh, something's in my head, so it's got to be in everyone else's head, right?
You should know. Yeah,
you should know.
Clearly,
of course, you should know.
Because I'm the boss. You should know. Big
mistake I made for a long time. It's like, can't you feel that yeah.
Yeah, right.
So we talked about, before we went on, and you mentioned Stephen Pressfield today, a great writer who I'll put a link to my podcast with him in the show notes. David Goggins we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Because all three of us, David, you, and me, have had our books published by Scribe. Scribe, well, it's called Scribe Media. I don't know if it's still called Scribe Media, but anyway, we're in great company, Kyle.
We're alums.
Yeah, we're alums, and if it wasn't for us, David Goggins may not be who he is today.
Facts. Yeah.
But another book that I
tired of carrying him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, for sure. Like my back's a little sore. Yeah,
right.
Another book that came to mind only because of the 10 we's, the begin with we, is a book called Relentless by Tim Grover. Have you ever heard of Tim Grover?
Oh yeah.
Coach
I've not read the book, but he's a savage Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan guy, right?
Yeah. And he's got 13 things in his book, Relentless.
Oh.
Okay. It's really good. I listened to it, so I didn't read it, but really good. He breaks people down into 3 categories. Shoot, I forget the first one, but it's closers and cleaners are the second 2. But cleaners are the top in his thing. But anyway, that's not really the story. His story was he's got 13 things. He numbers them all 1, Kyle, because he goes, if you give somebody a list and there's 10 things on that list, they are going to think that number 10 is less important than number 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's like, whenever I do lists, I just thought it was a very interesting way to approach it, because he's like, these 13 things, they're all important. And you, with details matters as one of yours, right? That was his detail. He's like, I cannot, if you don't do all 13 things, all of these things, you will not be successful. So they're all 1. So each one is like, number 1. And then he says it, does take it. Number 1.
Oh, moving on to number 1.
Yes.
Let's wrap up with number 1, by the way.
It's really good. It's really good to listen to, at least, because I didn't read it. So you've mentioned a lot of the 10 begin with we's, but there's one that you haven't mentioned that I'm actually most interested in. And it is number 4, we take action.
Yes, sir.
And I wrote that down, and then I wrote a question mark after it, because I was like, okay. I need you to clarify that, because you, at another point, mentioned that you can't really confuse movement with productivity, for example. Mm-hmm. So people read, we take action. They hear that, they're listening to the podcast. They're okay, what does that actually mean? I mean, I take action all the time. Who doesn't take action? What is it about taking action that makes it a we? One of your 10 we's.
Man, I'm gonna guess throughout your journey, especially in your business life, you have seen or are aware of areas of opportunity for us to be better, the team to be better, and that could be improving our product, improving our service, improving the customer experience, improving the employee experience, and just look the other way. We've all done it. And when we are aspiring to build what I call a culture of excellence, we don't look the other way. We recognize that thing over there, it's not working, and it's been broken for a while. I'm not saying I have the answers, but I am certainly going to point it out to the person who is responsible for that thing. That doesn't mean we're cowboys and we go, just start trying to fix something that is not in our domain. But it does mean we're going to acknowledge that it's there. We may not even get to it in the next month, year, or whatever, but we are not going to look away from it. The corollary, or the kind of the way I would compare that is, the TSA, Transportation Safety Administration, has, if you see something, say something. And a culture of excellence, if you see something, do something. That's we take action.
All right.
And Mike, I'll leave you with this on that one is, there's a company out there, very well-known company that every one of your audience has heard of and may even own one or more of their products, who has spent literally billions of marketing and advertising dollars on their version of this slogan. And it's just do it. Just do it. Nike's slogan isn't be the best. It's not you're number one. It's not let's go be excellent. Do it. Just do it, man. Just do it. Start something.
Yeah.
And that's how I want my teams to view challenges and view areas of opportunity for us to get better is it ain't going to change and it ain't going to fix itself. So we have to recognize this for ourselves and take action on it.
Just do it. Don't do it great. Don't do it excellently. Don't
Just do it,
worry.
man.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
And I have to add this though, man. The very next we own our mistakes.
Right.
Because if you want to create an environment that encourages people to raise their hand to say that thing in the corner needs to be addressed, or hey, we've been really underperforming in this area of the business. We got to take action to go fix that. If you want your team members to raise their hand and point these things out, you got to be comfortable that they're going to make mistakes trying to fix it. By definition, the thing that we're taking action on has not had any activity or action taken on it. So we're not familiar with it in many cases, which means there are going to be mistakes. We're going to fumble. We're going to stumble. So we have to own our mistakes, which is followed by the next we is we pick each other up. So when someone does say that thing needs to be addressed and they slip while they're addressing it, the first thing we have to do, not just the boss, but the team, we all have to say, here's my hand. I got you. Let's go. I'll pick you up. We're going to keep going. So I think those three are very important when mentioned together. And then, by the way, that's why there are 10 and not 10 number ones, because each of them builds upon the preceding we.
And I was not challenging your 10. I was just saying this is this.
I would embrace it though. I would embrace it.
Oftentimes the reason that something hasn't improved is because no one knows how to improve it, meaning they don't know how to take it from A to Z, which is the improvement. And so because they don't know how to take it from A to Z, they don't take anything.
Right.
Instead of looking at it and saying, well, I'm not sure how to get to Z, but I'm pretty sure that we can try B without the company folding.
Yeah.
So let's try B and we'll learn from trying B, and then that'll help us try C and, eventually get to Z. That's how I like to think about that.
Mike, in your answer, in that last 2 or 3 sentences, use the word we 3 times and let's 1 time. You nailed it. Like together, we can do anything.
Yeah.
Mike, if somebody dropped a problem right here in front of us right now, and something that you and I have so little familiarity with, we can get to the bottom of this problem. We may not be able to fix it today, tomorrow. Between the two of us, we know somebody we could call. We have the internet. Collectively, and that's the beauty of is there are so many diverse perspectives and experiences in a group of people that tackling the gnarliest of problems, the only way to be effective at that is the we.
Yeah. I do encourage everybody just before you buy the book, go to YouTube, go to Kyle's YouTube channel. He's got a trailer for the book, which is amazing. Like I wish I had, my assistant said to me, we have to do this with your next book, at which he sent me a link to it. He explains the 10 W's, super well done. And then once you hear that, you will know for sure why you need to buy this book and why you want to and need to reach out to Kyle to learn more and see what he can do to help yourself or your organization or whatever it is that you are trying to maximize and improve and make great. And Kyle, before we go, is there anything that I haven't asked you or I should have asked you that you want to leave us with?
Gratitude. And I'm thankful for the platform. I'm thankful for the really, really genuine conversation. As I mentioned, I do a lot of podcasts, and some of them are more rapid fire question and answer than they are conversations. And this filled my cup today, brother. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, grateful for you and the great work that you're doing. And I hope to have added a little bit of value to the show today.
Wow. You added more than a little bit of value. Thank you for engaging me and going in whatever direction I wanted to go. I did look it up. It's getting back to Tim Grover. It's Cooler, Closer, Cleaner. Another great book, Relentless by Tim Grover.
I got to grab that one, huh? Okay.
Yeah. He does it. It's really cool to listen to him go through those 3 types of people. And of course, Kobe and Michael are cleaners, amongst others. But
Yeah.
you used the word great a number of times when you were just sort of signing us off there. And one of the things I do every week is I encourage everyone that's listening to, one, realize that you have greatness inside of you, and two, do your best to maximize it every single day. Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Mike, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Owner Shift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller. And I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me, or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.